Chris, may I ask you to reflect briefly on your turn in the high-velocity spin cycle with Senator Schumer?
So here's what I think. I think the strongest argument they have is on the substance, not the politics. So I think if you think, oh, this is smart politics, the politics don't really matter. No one's going to remember there was a shutdown in a year and a half. So the strongest argument they have is on the substance. If they think there's some cataclysmic result of empowering the executive in a shutdown, okay. I mean, that's what he was arguing. I can't see the future. That doesn't seem to me correct when they're ignoring the law anyway. But I will say that I do think I don't think he's lying about the concern. I do think that's the concern. It's just a question of whether you think that's correct or not.
Yeah. Well, it was a thing to behold. Seeing you go toe-to-toe with him on that, my friend. Well timed, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Fireworks Day today in the news. There's so much to get to. Most importantly, I think, thousands of people fired by Donald Trump are getting their jobs back today because of the first round of proverbial fireworks that went off in a California federal courthouse. And I just got the transcript of what happened there. Trying all day to get it. Finally got it. I really want to share this with you. All right, so let me set the scene. Trump administration has sent a lawyer to defend them in this case in federal court in Northern California. But they are refusing to send any officials from the Trump administration to testify in this case, to explain what they have done and to be questioned about it. The basis of this case is that the Trump White House, the Office of Personnel Management in the Trump White House, told federal agencies last month, essentially, to fire tens of thousands of people who work for the government, potentially hundreds of thousands of people. And then after the Trump White House, the Office of Personnel Management, told the agencies to fire all those people, then all those people got fired. And it really does not seem like that was legal. It has never seemed like that was legal, that the White House would have the authority to make those kinds of mass firings. But again, they won't send anybody to testify about what exactly they did. So this is from the transcript. So the lawyer who is suing the Trump administration says this. Your Honor, quote, what we have before the court is record evidence that conclusively establishes that OPM directed the terminations at issue. We have a very unusual circumstance where the government has not attempted to say that they factually dispute that. They've actually withdrawn the declaration by which they were attempting to dispute that. And there's no record evidence on the other side by which they have disputed this fact. The judge. I tend to agree with you on that. And the government, I believe, has tried to frustrate the judge's ability to get at the truth of what happened here, and then set forth sham declarations to a sham declaration. They withdrew it, then substituted another. That's not the way it works in the U.S. District Court, the judge says. Quote, I'm going to talk to the government about that in a minute. I had expected to have an evidentiary hearing today in which these people would testify. And if they wanted to get your people on the stand, I was going to make that happen too. It would be fair. But instead, we have been frustrated in that. The judge then says to the lawyer for the plaintiffs, quote, I'd like to hear your views on what relief should be issued today. T-O-D-A-Y, today. The lawyer, thank you, Your Honor. We are aligned in wanting that to happen as well. He spelled out T-O-D-A-Y. And so then they have a conversation, the judge and the lawyer for the plaintiffs, the lawyer who's suing the Trump administration on behalf of the fired employees. And they talk about what the fired employees who are suing the Trump administration, what they're seeking from the judge today, the kind of relief they want. They say they want a list of everybody who's been fired. They haven't been able to get that, or even an enumeration from the government of how many people have been fired. They also want people to be reinstated if they have been fired illegally. So they go through all those details. Then it's time for the Trump administration lawyer to make his side of the case. And he starts explaining to the judge that all these fired workers, the only reason they were fired is because nobody wanted them. Nobody told anybody to fire anything. There was no instructions to fire people. These are just unwanted workers. If anybody wanted them back, they surely would have been rehired by now, right? At which point the judge interjects. The judge, quote, well, maybe that's why we need an injunction that tells them to rehire them. You will not bring the people in here to be cross-examined. You are afraid to do so because you know cross-examination would reveal the truth. Trump administration lawyer tries to interject. Respectfully, the judge continues, this is the U.S. District Court. Whenever you submit declarations, those people should be submitted to cross-examination, just like the plaintiff side should be. And we get at the truth of whether your story is actually true. I tend to doubt it. I tend to doubt that you are telling me the truth whenever we hear all the evidence eventually. Why can't you bring your people in to be cross-examined or to be deposed at their convenience? I said 2 hours for Mr. Ezell. Mr. Ezell is the acting head of OPM. I said 2 hours for Mr. Ezell, a deposition at his convenience. And you withdrew his declaration rather than do that? Come on, that's a sham. The judge says, quote, go ahead, it upsets me. I want you to know that. I have been practicing or serving in this court for over 50 years, and I know how we get at the truth. And you're not helping me get at the truth. You're giving me press releases, sham documents. All right, he says, quote, I'm getting mad at you, and I shouldn't. The judge then decided in this hearing today that he wasn't going to wait to give a written ruling. He decided, you know what, I've heard enough. He decided he was going to rule from the bench today. T-O-D-A-Y, today. So he started with this, the judge, quote, on February 13th, 2025, a briefing paper from Human Resources Management at the Forest Service says this, quote, all, that's spelled A-L-L, all federal agencies, including the Department of Agriculture, were notified on February 12th by the Office of Personnel Management to terminate all employees who have not completed their probationary or trial period. That then led to the termination of a lot of people, the judge says. But one in particular I will give as an example. Leandra Bailey was a physical science information specialist in Albuquerque. In September of last year, she received a performance review in which she was, quote, fully successful in every category, not just some, but every category. On February 13th, she was terminated using the OPM template letter. Because in addition to directing these terminations, OPM gave a proposed letter, and the letter said, I'm reading from it, Memorandum for Leandra Bailey, February 13th, from the Director of Human Resource Management at the U.S. Forest Service. This is just one sentence, quote, the agency finds, based on your performance, that you have not demonstrated that your further employment at the agency would be in the public interest, close quote. And then the judge says, this, despite the fact that her most recent review was fully successful in every category. The judge says, now, how could it be, you might ask, that the agency could find that based on her performance when her performance had been stellar? The reason OPM wanted to put this based on performance was, at least in part, in my judgment, a gimmick. Because the law always allows you to fire somebody for performance. And the judge says this, now, what I'm about to say is not the legal basis for what I'm going to order today, but I just want to say it. He says, quote, it is a sad day when our government would fire some good employee and say it was based on performance when they know good and well that's a lie. Excellent in all, fully, what was the phrase? I don't want to misstate it. Quote, fully successful in every category, yet they terminate her based on her performance. That should not have been done in our country. It was a sham in order to avoid statutory requirements. It also happens to be that whenever you fire somebody based on performance, then they can't get unemployment insurance. So that makes it even worse, doesn't it? And then it makes it even worse because the next employer is going to say, well, have you ever been terminated based on performance? They're going to have to say yes to thousands of people. It is illustrative of the manipulation that was going on by OPM to try to orchestrate this government-wide termination of probationary employees. Quote, the court finds that OPM did direct all the agencies to terminate probationary employees. The court rejects the government's attempt to use these press releases and to read between the lines to say that the agency heads made their own decision with no direction from OPM. The relief that's going to be granted is as follows. First, the temporary restraining order will be extended. The VA shall immediately offer reinstatement to any and all probationary employees terminated on or about February 13th or 14th. This order finds that all such terminations were directed by defendant OPM and were unlawful because OPM had no authority to do so. Further, the VA shall cease any and all use of the template termination notice provided by OPM and shall immediately advise all probationary employees terminated February 13th and 14th that the notice and termination have been found to be unlawful by the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. The VA shall cease any termination of probationary employees at the direction of OPM. To repeat, this order holds that OPM has no authority whatsoever to direct, order, or require in any way that any agency fire any employee. Now, given the arguments and the facts in this case, namely that defendants have attempted to recast these directives as mere guidance, my order today, quote, further prohibits defendants from giving guidance as to whether any employee should be terminated. Any termination of agencies' employees must be made by the agencies themselves, if made at all, and they must be made in conformity with the Civil Service Reform Act and the Reduction in Force Act and any other constitutional or statutory legal requirement. He says, quote, in 7 calendar days, relief defendant, VA, the VA shall submit a list of all probationary employees terminated on or about February 13th and 14th with an explanation as to each of what has been done to comply with this order. Then the judge says this. Now, this order so far has only mentioned the VA, the Veterans Administration. But the same relief is extended, and I'm not going to repeat it, but I'm extending the same relief to the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Treasury. And so it's the VA plus all those other agencies. He says, and this is without prejudice to extending the relief later in further to other agencies. The judge then closes with this. I will try to get out a short memorandum opinion that elaborates on this order, but this is the order, and it counts effective immediately. Please don't say, oh, I'm waiting for the written order. This is the order from the bench. And then the judge then closes with this admonition to the Trump administration lawyer. Quote, if you want to appeal to the Court of Appeals, God bless you. I want you to, because I'm tired of seeing you stonewall on trying to get at the truth. And that is how thousands of people who work in our government, who Donald Trump and his top campaign donor tried to fire, that is how thousands of Americans got their jobs back today. At the VA, at USDA, at the Defense Department, at the Department of Energy, at the Department of Interior, which includes the National Park Service, at the Treasury Department, which of course includes the IRS. The court ruling also means that the Office of Personnel Management, which they've been using as like the central office for all this stuff that DOJ has been doing, right? The Office of Personnel Management at the White House can no longer tell anyone anything about anybody who should be fired for any reason from any part of the US government. This is the order. You know, after getting reamed out like that and losing so resoundingly in court, I mean, they didn't just have what they've done already reversed by a judge. It wasn't just that thousands of people got their jobs back today. It was not only that this judge told the agency, don't you even try to do anything like that ever again. Oh, and by the way, what you've been telling this court appears not to be true, and you'll be under oath before this court if you want to keep telling porky pies to a federal judge. You'll do it in person and bear the consequences. I mean, after a government agency gets sliced and diced and julienned like that, like the OPM did today in court in this case, you would, under normal circumstances, expect the agency in question to put out a statement in response, like through their spokesperson. That said, in this case, the spokesperson for this particular agency, the Trump administration's spokesperson at OPM, didn't put out a statement today. You know, she is probably busy. Yesterday, we learned from CNN that inside her office at OPM, the OPM spokesperson has been very busy posting dozens of fashion influencer videos inside her government office, in which she blows kisses and twirls and shows off all her different looks, and then she posts links where you can go buy the amazing fashion that she's wearing to her job in the office where she works as the spokesperson for OPM. That is the spokesperson at the agency that has been firing thousands of park rangers and scientists and nuclear security experts. Because obviously those people don't deserve their jobs, unlike #her and the Trump folks, right? Who definitely know what they're doing and who definitely deserve their jobs because they're doing such a good job at them. That story about the OPM spokesperson broke yesterday. Apparently she still has her job today. Because, well, why shouldn't she? Meanwhile, here's how the Trump administration is doing with its management of the federal government. Just in today's news. This is from the Washington Post. Quote, last week, amid the scramble inside federal agencies to meet Trump's return to office mandate, one CDC employee received links to a new government-wide initiative promising to connect those who need workspace with those who have extra seats. When the CDC employee entered her home address to find nearby offices, she was surprised to receive suggestions for a closed Subway sandwich shop and a self-storage facility. Another member of her CDC team was directed to a post office. So they work at the CDC. They were told to report for work. The Trump administration told them to report for work at a post office or a closed Subway sandwich shop or a mini storage. CDC employees. Sure, try it, see how it goes. Quote, another worker from a federal scientific agency was asked by an administrator to fill out a similar space request form, part of a Trump administration rollout of such services, including one they're calling Space Match, aimed at connecting federal employees with offices where they could work. When the federal scientific agency worker entered her information, the two closest offices to which she was recommended did not seem to be federal offices at all. Quote, one appeared to be a building in an industrial zone that appeared to host support groups for people dealing with alcohol or debt problems. The other appeared to be a private home in a 4-unit building. So this is a person who has a job at a federal scientific agency. Donald Trump has a new high-tech tool, a fancy new website that has assigned to this person a new place to work. And the new place to work, this person has a choice, can either be a rehab or the house of someone who this person doesn't know. Space Match. I bet it has an X in it somewhere. Space Match. These guys are so tech savvy, right? They're so efficient. You know, taxes are due in a month. Taxes are due April 15th. This week, Donald Trump, in his infinite wisdom, told people who work at the IRS that they should show up to work at buildings for which there are no desks for them. Quote, they have people in conference rooms, cafeterias, and even some closets. A Q&A handout was given to IRS employees. It included this question: how should I store my laptop and accessories at the end of the day if I don't have a permanent desk? The answer, quote, employees should secure their laptops and equipment in secure locations, such as via cable lock to a designated storage area, locker, or permanent furniture fixture. This is what they're telling IRS to do. Buy a cable lock, like for your bike, and then like lock your laptop to a credenza. Or maybe you can find a really heavy potted plant. See if you can find a pillar. And then you can lock your laptop to that. All your stuff, you just lock your stuff to that. Hopefully everything's got like hooks. That's how Donald Trump is running the IRS, the agency that collects all the funds that run the federal government. That's how he's running the agency that is supposed to process hundreds of millions of tax returns that are due in 1 month. Do you think you're going to get your refund this year? We are keeping a close eye tonight on what is going on at the IRS. Even with all the probationary employees ordered reinstated today, the Washington Post broke the news today that Trump intends now to fire another 18,000 people from the IRS. He wants them gone by May 15th. There also appears to be a lot of concern about one particular firing that just happened there. They just fired the top lawyer at the IRS. That is reportedly ringing some major alarm bells by people who know how that agency works. So we will be keeping eyes on the IRS. Markets tanked again today, on purpose because of Donald Trump. The S&P 500 is now down more than 10% in less than a month. 10% in less than a month. Both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ are now in what they call correction territory, and that sounds good, but it's not. The Dow dropped another 500 points today. Today, the Trump administration, had to pull another high-profile nominee. This time it was the vaccine conspiracy theorist Dave Weldon, whom Trump had nominated to run the CDC. They pulled his confirmation this morning, just before his confirmation hearing, which was scheduled for this morning. They pulled it at the last minute because Dave Weldon apparently does not have the votes to get through the United States Senate and get confirmed. Or at least I think so. That's what he tried to explain himself in a bizarre, misspelled, and typo-ridden letter he released after they pulled his name, in which he repeatedly praised Bobby Kennedy Jr., but misspelled Bobby, because that's a hard one. The Trump administration today, also apparently well and truly decided that it might have been a mistake to try to send random immigrants to Guantanamo as if they were Al-Qaeda. As of today, they have now officially emptied the makeshift prison they were trying to set up at Guantanamo, which Trump said was going to hold 30,000 immigrants. It now holds 0. Today, this was the lobby of Trump Tower in Manhattan, as Jewish protesters said, quote, "not in our name," and engaged in mass peaceful civil disobedience in protest of Trump ordering the deportation of a Columbia University student named Mahmoud Khalil. They ordered his deportation. They are trying to revoke his green card, specifically because he was involved in protests against the war in Gaza. You can see their signs today in the lobby of Trump Tower. "Come for one, face us all. Fight Nazis, not students. Jews say do not comply." Dozens of people were arrested in that act of civil disobedience today by Jewish activist groups. Today, NBC News reports that Donald Trump has given the order to the U.S. Defense Department to prepare an invasion plan for Panama. To prepare an invasion plan for the United States to send U.S. troops to Panama to invade that country, to seize the Panama Canal by force. He has given the order to the Defense Department to prepare that plan. And you know what? I'm sure the American people are going to love that. Everybody's going to sign right up to follow, Corporal Vance into an invasion of Panama. Trump today continued to insist that Canada must become the 51st state in the United States. He says that is the only way out of the tariff insanity he is currently using to butcher the economies of both our countries. That's the way out, he says. Canada has to become the 51st state, or he's going to keep doing what he's doing. In the Oval Office today, Trump insisted in front of the head of NATO that the United States is going to annex Greenland. He said today he thought, quote, that would happen. The Prime Minister of Greenland responded by saying that he is convening the leaders of all Greenland's political parties to, quote, tighten our rejection of Trump. In Denmark, the reaction was clear as a bell. The head of the Defense Committee in the Danish Parliament said tonight in response, quote, it would mean war. He said, quote, it would mean war between two NATO countries. Which, of course, would be the end of NATO, among other things. But the end of NATO, for the record, is the thing that Vladimir Putin wants more than anything. It's the thing that Donald Trump could give him that would really mean the most to him. It's Putin's reason for living. Vladimir Putin today, quite predictably, rejected the supposed ceasefire deal that the United States presented to Russia on the Ukraine war. Wow, who could have seen that coming? Trump will respond, obviously, by giving Putin more things he might want, to which Putin will keep saying no. That's just today's news, some of today's news on Donald Trump. Does this sound like a populist, popular leader doing things that the people like and that the people want? I mean, just on the Russia thing, new Quinnipiac polling out today, which country comes closer to sharing the values of the United States, Ukraine or Russia? The American people say Ukraine, 65%, Russia, 9%. Same poll. Is Donald Trump not tough enough on Russia? Correct. Donald Trump is not tough enough on Russia, says more than 60% of the American people. Here's a straight up clear view. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of Vladimir Putin? The proportion of Americans who have a favorable view of Vladimir Putin is 7%. The proportion of Americans who have an unfavorable view of Vladimir Putin is 81%. And where would you put Donald Trump in that mix? The US economy and the US government and all of America's international relationships are being set on fire by a leader who is being opposed in the courts for his illegal actions and who is being opposed in the streets by a public that is increasingly horrified by what he is doing. There is not going to be an easy way out of this, but there is going to have to be some kind of way out of this. This is a collision course from 10 different directions. Congressman Mike Levin joins us straight ahead. Stay with us.